From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
It's the BBG, not the BBC. You're listening to the Richie Allen Radio Show, live from Salford in Greater Manchester.
And a very good evening, good afternoon, good morning, good night to you, wherever you happen to be. How you doing? It's Wednesday's programme, April 1st, 2020. I am Richie Allen, broadcasting live from Salford, as you just heard. You can tweet this programme right now. It's at Richie Allen Show on Twitter. I'm sure there's lots you've got to say. I'm sure you have lots to say about coronavirus lockdown and anything else, so I look forward to hearing from you. I've got a really terrific guest lined up for you today as well. She'll join me in around about 30 minutes or thereabouts for an extended conversation. I'll tell you more about that in a minute. It's a pretty grim, overcast day in Salford here. Again, the streets deserted. People seem to be observing the lockdown here, although my neighbour Stuart reliably informs me that in nearby Eccles, people seems to be busier there, people out and about there in nearby Eccles. Right, let's do it then. Your Richie Allen Show. Let's get on with it.
It's the Richie Allen Show. Broadcasting live on richieallen.co.uk and multiple platforms around the world. And now, here's your host, Richie Allen.
Now, we'll be joined this hour for an extended conversation by the host of the Celestial Report, a lady called Celeste Solomon. Now, she's a former FEMA worker and also she's an author as well. She's got a website called shepherdsheart.life. Really interesting lady. I want to give a shout out to my mate Joanne in Chorlton in Manchester who put me on to Celeste. I'm glad she did. Celeste has been doing some stellar investigative journalism around coronavirus at the World Economic Forum, where this virus maybe came from and what the future is. You know, who stands to benefit from it and what it means for us all. So Celeste Solomon joins the programme. She'll be live with me in around about 25 to 30 minutes time. Looking forward to that. And again, I know I say it all the time, if there are things you'd like to say, you can do so through the medium of Twitter. It's the best way to reach this particular live radio programme. Yeah, good. Yeah, again, eerie around Salford. This city, you know, working class heartland, industrial heartland. And people have swallowed this hook, line and sinker. This need to be locked down. I'll say no more because I said this yesterday. I'm pretty sure I said it on Monday as well. Well, did you hear the latest? Did you? Men, I'm going to get very sexist here now. Very sexist. Men, boys, did you hear the latest? All Champions League and Europa League matches have been suspended until further notice by UEFA because of the coronavirus pandemic. National team games that had been scheduled for June have been postponed. Mother, Jesus, Mary and Holy St. Joseph, I don't mean to blaspheme. Qualifying matches for the women's football cancelled. The governing body of UEFA, all the 55 member associations met today and they agreed with this. Agreed. No sport. Nothing. No football. No rugby league. No rugby union. No women's beach volleyball. Sod all. And they announced an hour ago that Wimbledon has been cancelled too. We're to continue apparently to spend the weekends cooped up with our wives and girlfriends. Do you hear that, Tom?
No. Could you repeat it? Because I can't believe my fucking ears.
No sport, Tom. Nothing. Except wives and girlfriends at weekends. It's dreadful, isn't it? And I'm fed up, to be honest. I'm fed up of looking at the future Mrs. Allen now, to be honest. I'm fed up of looking at her. Gorgeous and all as she is, I'm sick to death of looking at her. And I think the feeling is mutual. There's tension in the Allen, future Mrs. Allen household. There's tension, there's cabin fever setting in. And it's not good, but we're not quite here yet, though.
Wendy, darling, light of my life, I'm not gonna hurt you. You didn't let me finish my sentence. I said, I'm not gonna hurt you. I'm just gonna bash your brains in. I'm gonna bash them right the fuck in.
Yeah, nobody's bashing any brains in Casa Richie just yet. But we're not far away from it, I don't think. I said to the future Mrs. Allen, have we got any board games? This is true now. This is true, not jest. Any board games? I thought we must have. We've collected that much tat through our 18 years together, that much crap. I said we must have games, we must have Operation, surely. We must have Hungry Hippos, surely. We must have Ludo, Snakes and Ladders. Do you remember the compendium of games? There was always a dodgy aunt or dodgy uncle who gave you a compendium of games at Christmas. It was one box with about 70 shit games. I said we must have Monopoly, Cluedo, but no, we don't. Apparently, we have one board game in this house, and this is true. One board game and one board game only. And it is Bruce Forsyth's Play Your Cards Right.
Nice to see you, to see you!
Honest to God, that's the one we have. I don't know how we came by it. And I looked at it yesterday, but you need 3 or more people to play the thing. We can't play it by ourselves. 3 or more people, apparently. So I'm trying to train the dogs to say higher or lower. We've got a Labrador Retriever and we've got a German Shepherd here. I'm trying to train them to play Bruce Forsyth's Play Your Cards Right, because it's 3 or more players, you see. Higher or lower than an 8? Higher then, higher, right. Do you remember Bruce Forsyth's Play Your Cards Right? We asked 100 men if you thought you'd get away with shagging your next door neighbour's wife forever, would you? How many men said yes, if I could get away with shagging next door neighbour's wife forever and not get caught, they would do it? How many? 64, apparently 64. The Ginger Ninja Kay Burley was in fine form this morning on Sky News. Kay, go on Kay Burley. Lockdown, says Kay, is messing with our mental health. Here's Kay, Q. Well, it isn't so much hilarity as, well, it's bizarreness. Bizarreness, can you say that? Here's Kay Burley.
Hello again, 8:30 on Wednesday, the 1st of April. Welcome back to Kay Burley at breakfast. The spread of the virus has had a huge impact on the NHS and has clear physical consequences. But some health professions are warning that it will likely have a significant impact on mental health as well. Joining us is Professor Neil Greenberg from the Royal College of Psychiatrists. Hello to you, Professor. Thank you for joining us. Talk about the mental challenges of this virus, if you would.
Right, okay. So Professor Greenberg, this made me laugh. Because if I was producing television today, I love stereotypes. So if I'm going to look for a psychiatrist, just for the stereotyping hell of it, I'm going to find a Jewish bloke. So she got a Jewish bloke on. It's a very stereotypical thing, you see, your therapist being Jewish. Anyway, Professor Greenberg, very amiable fella. What does he say? He's got some interesting things to say.
Yeah, good morning. So I think for many of us at the moment, being sort of stuck in our houses is going to cause us a great deal of frustration and at times, no doubt, distress as well.
And possibly beating our heads in with baseball bats, possibly.
We carried out a research project actually looking exactly on this topic about the impact of isolation and quarantine.
That's nice and handy now. They already carried out a study on the impact of being in quarantine. So this is good.
From our team at King's College London. And what we found was that actually if quarantine is done well, then actually it doesn't tend to have any particular long-term consequences. But if it's done badly, and I'll explain what I mean by that in a second, then it can actually have some long-term difficulties which can go on for months and months or even years. So good quarantine is where people get the right information, they understand the rationale for why the quarantine or the isolation is needed, they have good access to basic medical health and food supplies. They're able to communicate like this with other people relatively easily, and also that they're able to not be financially out of pocket by a long way. And really importantly, they have to also not have the period of quarantine extended again and again and again without a very good reason.
Yeah, but none of that is happening. So Kay Burley says to him, what can we do for ourselves in this very difficult time? And his answer is priceless.
So what can you do to help yourself? Well, there's kind of three main groups of things that you can do. First of all, whilst the media are great, obviously, it's important to limit the amount of exposure to the media, because that tends to cause anxiety. It kind of fuels our uncertainty about the situation. That's one thing.
That's one thing you can do. Switch off the news and stop listening to fear-mongering propagandizers like UK. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. He won't be on again, presumably. So Kay swerved that point. Totally didn't want to go down that road about not listening to the media, which is fueling your anxiety. And went here.
What positive skills can we take from being in isolation?
Well, I think many of us have found that actually we become more able to use communication techniques. Certainly in my day-to-day life now, I now know how to use Zoom and Microsoft Teams when I didn't before. I think for many people, although they will find some of this quite difficult, it does present an opportunity, as I said, to actually alter your health in a positive way, and actually to maybe find relationships with other people who you didn't have time for actually are quite sustaining. The people probably most at risk of having great difficulties at this time are people who may be particularly psychologically vulnerable, or those who may have mental health problems of their own.
Yeah, get used to communicating online and learn how to do that with the various apps that, emerge on a daily basis, said Professor Greenberg, because that's where it's going, you see. Interpersonal relationships will be conducted in the near future almost exclusively in the Twitter sphere, on Facebook, on Instagram. This is where it's all going. I do believe this. Anyway, hearing that the professor is getting on well with Zoom, Kay Burley bizarrely wraps it up by suggesting that she'll be playing Trivial Pursuit with her audience tomorrow morning on Sky News. I sit there sometimes and words fail me.
Okay. I didn't know about Zoom or Teams either until this latest lockdown. We're going to have a get...
What is this latest lockdown? Somebody's been locking down Kay Burley, and we don't, what previous lockdowns did we have? Anyway, she's going to be doing Trivial Pursuit live on Sky tomorrow morning.
Game of Trivial Pursuit tomorrow. If you fancy it, Professor, let me know. We'll count you in. Now you know how to use Zoom.
Right.
Okay, thanks. I don't think that was a yes, was it?
That was definitely not a yes, Kay. Kay Burley as mad as a box of frogs resting on a skateboard being pulled by a bunch of kittens. Nutcase. Donald Trump has done more flip-flops on the virus and what needs to be done about it than Sideshow Bob, hasn't he? Hasn't he? First of all, the hairpiece said it was the deep state, didn't he? It was the deep state trying to bring him down. Then he said we'll be back in business in no time. We'll all be at church saying our prayers. Now, as you heard on the news, he's saying lock yourself down. There's some bad times ahead in the next few weeks. Sky News US correspondent Amanda Walker explains Donald's frequent changes of heart.
Donald Trump's sort of language and behaviour around it has really been a winding path for weeks now. The latest stage of that seems to be a grasping of the reality, a kind of acknowledgement of the gravity of this situation. Now, why has that happened when you consider that just days ago, Donald Trump was talking about reopening America for business. He wanted to see that on April 12th, which is just less than 2 weeks away. He talked about wanting to see churches packed with people. People want to go back to work, he said. Now there's been a complete turnaround from that, and it seems to be down to data, horrifying data that was presented to him by his experts, Dr. Deborah Birx and Dr. Anthony Fauci, who are leading the coronavirus task force. They showed him modelling, which essentially said, best case scenario, there'll be 100,000 deaths in the US. Worst case scenario, if nothing is done, if there are no mitigating factors, there could be 2.2 million deaths. Now, we've heard the president cite those figures a lot, so it seems that they have really hit home for him. So the message now, it was actually the end of the 15-day period yesterday at the news briefing. So the message now is 30 days to slow the spread. So it's a continuation of the advisory that was in place for people. If you're showing symptoms, stay at home. If you've tested positive, your whole household should stay at home. If you are older, if you have serious underlying medical conditions.
Yeah, I think what they did was they scared the granny out of Donald Trump. That's what they did. They didn't show him the statistics. They showed him the Zapruder film again, the unedited version of it. They showed him the unedited version of the Zapruder film, where you can see telescopic rifles in about 15 different locations. Donald, tell the people they have to be locked down and that this could kill hundreds of thousands of them. All right? All right. Let's get serious for a minute. 18 minutes past the hour. Nearly a fifth of all small and medium-sized businesses in the UK are unlikely to get the money they need to survive the next 4 weeks. Unlikely to get it, in spite of alleged support from the UK government. Now, who's saying this? Well, a network of accountants is suggesting between 800,000 and 1 million firms in the UK may go out of business in the next few weeks. Gone, kaput. Many of these firms have been telling the media today that banks are refusing them emergency loans. In response, the banks are saying, we're following the rules as laid out by the government. The banks, eh? Well, here's Sky Business presenter Ian King, who's got a decent programme on Sky News at 1:30 Monday to Friday. Ian King, here he is talking about what the banks are doing.
The banks were pretty much convinced that they were already in a position for their lending not to be compromised during this period. But anecdotally, we've heard ever since Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor, unveiled the SME lending packages that he hoped would keep credit flowing to small businesses in particular. We've had a lot of complaints from these companies that they're not getting the money through that they need to, partly because of bureaucracy in some cases, partly because the banks can't cope with the flood of demand, but also because the banks are sticking in some cases to their traditional risk assessments. In other words, insisting that they would need to take security over some loans, insisting in some cases that they would only grant these emergency loans to small business customers where they could prove that they've been directly impacted by coronavirus. And there is a debate really as to whether the Bank of England should have stepped in directly and started lending to companies, as has been suggested is going to be the case in the United States with the Federal Reserve.
Yes, but the banks don't want firms to survive. We know this. Well, when I say we know it, you might know it. I don't know about you, really, what you do and don't know. You might know it. I know it. Banks want firms to collapse because when business collapses and people get into severe financial difficulties even around the world, it sees a transfer of assets to these financial institutions. Because in lieu of the money you don't have, you've got to pay back the banks with your physical assets. And what's disgusting about this is, and the vast majority of people in the UK do not know this, is that when the bank loans you money, forget you, if a bank said tomorrow to a small business, here is £40,000 to help you meet your immediate debts, to help you satisfy your creditors in the short term, the bank, by issuing the £40,000 loan, hasn't taken on any risk because the money is a figment of the imagination of both the bank and the receiving borrower. Banks create money out of nothing. I have to keep saying this. They loan up to 10 times their capital reserves. This is fractional reserve banking. Of course, the banks are not going to do what Rishi Sunak, the lying, pathologically lying Chancellor of the Exchequer, said. The banks will look after the small businesses in the short term. We'll borrow hundreds of billions. We'll make sure that these businesses survive. The people behind the banks don't want businesses to survive. They don't want you to survive. They don't want you to make your next mortgage payment or the one after that or the one after that. Because then they can come and take your house. Lovely. Vaccines then. Vaccines. Labour today, the Labour Party, in the guise of, or in the presence of, or in the person of Jonathan Ashworth, who is their shadow Health Secretary. Labour has been saying, well, they've been criticising the UK government's response to this coronavirus. They've been blaming the government for not getting protective equipment to frontline workers in hospitals, in doctor surgeries, and so on, so on, so on. So Jonathan Ashworth was doing the rounds of the news radio programmes, and he spoke to Talk Radio's Mike Graham about our approach in the UK versus more draconian approaches around Europe. And Ashworth says, Labour's Jonathan Ashworth, we might have cycles of lockdowns in the future until we have the vaccine, which we all should have.
We will see. I mean, we all want this effort to beat this virus to succeed, obviously, don't we? But, you know, there are big questions about who has got the right approach.
Yeah, exactly.
Or those in the Asian countries.
Well, quite. And also with China currently being accused of lying about the numbers and lying about how they actually dealt with it, and possibly now lying about how they have dealt with it and how it's kind of coming out of a bad place. It's difficult to know. What do you make of those accusations?
Well, I mean, I think there's a lot of suspicion and mistrust of China, isn't there, in all of this? And we'll have to see what happens in the next couple of days with their numbers. But I think people can be generally trust South Korea. They're a liberal, democratic country, and their numbers they've been very good at suppressing this virus, and they've had very low death rates compared to many of the countries in Europe. So, and you know, they've really invested in testing. They're testing, I think, on a per capita basis more than other countries, because they really think that is the way in which you beat this virus.
Do you think once this is all over, the world should consider some kind of sanction against China?
Well, I mean, I don't know about that, but I mean, obviously, if we think it began in China, we've got to have questions about how it began and what went on there. And I think that the priority for the world, though, at the moment, has got to be the development of a vaccine. And when that vaccine emerges, making sure it's distributed across the world quickly, because there is no escape from this unless we get vaccinated. I mean, some are speculating we could go through cycles of lockdowns. You know, we'd lock down for a couple of months or so, come out, then lock down again until a vaccine emerges. So when the vaccine is available, we've got to make sure that is distributed across the world.
Let's all have the vaccine, and in the meantime, let's have pockets of lockdowns so that people can get used to being locked down. This is the Richie Allen Radio Show. It is Wednesday, April 1st. Welcome to the show. I've just checked in with Celeste Solomon. I can't wait to chat with her. She'll be with me in around about 6 or 7 minutes' time.
Renowned healer Mark Bayersky travels the world to find the most unique and powerful crystals for self-healing. Since the ancient times, crystals have been used as healing tools. They hold a natural healing vibration and are highly charged in positive energy. Mark teaches how to channel the universal energy and transfer it to the crystal to activate its healing power. Each crystal is used for its unique ability to target a different physical or emotional challenge. Mark Bayersky is an author, healer, speaker, and founder of the Pure Energy Healing Academy. He shares powerful messages of inspiration and healing on his daily YouTube videos, reaching millions worldwide. Mark's crystals, healing oils, and incense sticks are most sought after by other healers. His collection is available online at www.markbayersky.com. His work is presented through Lemon House, a company that creates and curates consciously made gifts.
Right, welcome back to the programme. Lots of tweets coming in. I expect to hear from many of you when Celeste joins me in a few minutes' time. Lots to talk about with her. Really glad that Joe, my friend Joe in Chorlton, put me on to Celeste's channel. Really good information there, really important information there, and disseminated in a way that is very easy to follow and easy to understand, and that's very, very important. It really is in the independent media. So she joins me shortly. Tony Gosling is in New Zealand. Tony travels in New Zealand pretty much every year or every other year. I've been chatting with him on through text message, and I'm going to phone him early tomorrow morning and record a conversation with him, because he's got a lot of very interesting things to say as well. And we'll feature that on tomorrow's programme, Thursday's programme. So lots to do this week. Right, here's a tune for you then. Let's have a tune. Music from the Goo Goo Dolls on the Richie Allen Radio Show, Wednesday's programme. Coming back with Celeste Solomon, don't miss her, back in about 3 minutes' time. Right, music from the Goo Goo Dolls and Iris on the Richie Allen Radio Show. 29 minutes to the top of the hour. And the top of the hour is 6 p.m. if you're listening in the UK. Welcome back to the programme. I'm really excited about meeting my guest for the first time. We'll introduce her in a second and say hello to her. Fascinating lady, hugely popular podcast and website, stateside, as I mentioned today, and doing some fascinating and very interesting investigative journalism around the reason or the reasons for this so-called pandemic. So we'll introduce Celeste in a moment. But just to very briefly introduce it, if you've been watching the UK media in the last few days, you will notice or have noticed that some pretty heavyweight former prime ministers and former chancellors have been brought onto television programmes to give their opinion on what needs to be done. And there is a common theme. If you listen to Tony Blair, for example, that would be the war criminal mass murderer Tony Blair on Sky News on Sunday. Gordon Brown, his successor and former chancellor, has been on. David Blunkett, former Home Secretary. John Major, former UK Prime Minister. They're talking repeatedly about the need to accept that we are moving into a new time when decisions need to be made on a global basis. Now, if you've listened to programmes like this, and if you followed people like Celeste Solomon, whom we're going to hear from in a moment, you'll know that we've believed for a long time that there is an agenda to move us towards a place where we are governed from maybe a single world body, a Unitarian organisation that makes decisions for everything. So this particular so-called pandemic, this massive problem, this coronavirus, they're dragging out some of the old heavyweights, politicians, men and women, and they're all saying that we need to accept that everything is a global issue. Something happens in China, something happens in Japan, and it can impact the rest of the world. So we need to have some sort of system in place whereby we can deal with that. I suppose to most people who are uneducated in such matters, it sounds pretty benign, but it isn't benign. Let's introduce my guest. Great guest. Delighted to have her on. Delighted to discover her. She is hugely popular, massively popular podcast, which is hosted in many places, but you can find it on YouTube. I will put links out to it. She presents the Celestial Report, but she's also written several successful books. She is a former FEMA employee. How interesting is that? That's the Federal Emergency Management Agency. We heard a lot about FEMA in the wake of September the 11th. Let's just welcome her. Her website is shepherdsheart.life. Let's welcome Celeste Bishop Solomon to the show. Celeste, thank you so much for your time today. How are you?
I'm doing great.
Thanks for coming on. I know you're busy. And we have something in common. We both have got golden retriever dogs. Yours is a year and a half old. Mine is still ripping the house to pieces, Celeste. What am I going to do? Will it pass before we talk about more serious matters?
It will pass. About a year old, your golden retriever will still have energy, but is going to just be a delight.
Thank God for that. We might not have a house in a year's time, but we'll have we'll have a more stable dog. I'm delighted you're on, and again, thanks to our mutual friend Joanne for connecting us. I meant it when I said hugely successful podcast. I've been watching episodes after episode after episode, and I commend you on the cerebral and academic approach to your work. It's excellent. Celeste, what's going on? Why am I going out this morning in Greater Manchester and seeing empty streets? I'm hearing the birds again, which is a nice thing, but I'm not seeing anybody out and about. People are locked down. People are terrified. We've all the time that we need, you and I, or all the time that you can give us. What do you think is really going on and why?
So it was kind of interesting. I knew, just given my training, when I saw the outbreak in China, that it was going to go global. So I started planning for that contingency. And then many of your listeners might be familiar with the Davos World Economic Forum, and it met in January. And it just so happened I searched different sites, and as soon as their conference was done, or forum, or whatever they call it, I tripped upon what they were doing with the coronavirus. And your listeners can go to www.weforum.org. And if you go under platforms, and then you can see the COVID action platform. And when you go there, it has several different things that they want to do. They want to galvanize the global business community for collective action. That is basically a global fascism. They want to protect people's livelihoods and facilitate business continuity. There's two things in there. That's code. They're basically going to, under the guise of COVID, they are going to transform people's jobs from the old way that they worked into this new global order. So coming on the other side of COVID, we're going to be in a highly technological type of environment. Artificial intelligence is going to be running the show. And so that's the first part of it. And then to facilitate the business continuity, I'm sure that in the UK, you have the continuity of government. In the United States, it's either referred to as COOP, C-O-O-P, or COG, continuity of government. Well, this is the business equivalent of that. And that is because the world there's a private public partnership.
Yeah.
It's a marriage between the public and the private industry, which is global fascism. And they need this continuity of government to survive. And so the business players are very much involved. And then they want to mobilize cooperation and business support for this COVID-19 response. And so they're mobilizing, and they're using a lot of messaging. I'm sure you're getting it in the UK. If I go on YouTube, for instance, it says, do you want to go to the CDC and find out the latest on the COVID? Or if I turn on Netflix or Stars or something and want to watch something, it says, we have to all lock down and do our part, rah, 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 for the COVID thing. So that's they're kind of in a nutshell what they're getting at, but it's much more nefarious and deep what they're rolling out as we are all confined to our homes.
Really good catch, that World Economic Forum website and what emerged from the Davos meeting in January. And I'll put links on our Twitter and Facebook pages for people who are hearing this for the first time to your presentations on your YouTube channel, because they're brilliant, Celeste. They really are. And it's great work to discover that. I can imagine a small business owner looking at the language that you've just alluded to and thinking, oh, that's lovely, because it sounds very benign. I mean, we heard today, Celeste, that somewhere between 800,000 and 1 million small businesses will fail in the next month in the UK because the banks are not giving them the emergency loans to tide them over quick enough. Now, that's another story for another day. But some of those small businesses might look at that sentence that you read out there so eloquently, and they might think that's good news. Galvanise the global business community for collective action. Sounds wonderful. But to me, and I'm lucky enough to have the experience of interviewing and speaking with people like you, to me that reads, well, what we're going to do is we're going to get a person or persons or a very small group of people to make a decision, and you're all going to have to go with it, whether you like it or not, right? That's the fascistic angle here.
Right. Absolutely. And do you have the term over in the UK, flattening the curve?
Yes, we do. Yeah. Do you want to explain that for our listeners who haven't heard it before?
Okay, so basically that started popping up about right after the millennium in the year 2000. And it was actually, they applied it to, it was in politics, especially in agriculture. And they said leveling the playing field. And what that meant is that everybody had to be the same. There could no longer be poor or rich. You could not successfully start a little bakery and work your way up to the top. That everybody, it didn't matter if you were in the UK, America, Bangladesh, South America, we all only had access to certain things, a certain amount of money, a certain amount of resources. And so it is basically a global fascist, socialist, communist type of situation with the UN at the helm, although the UN is utilizing artificial intelligence. So really, this whole thing is being orchestrated and managed by autonomous machines.
Talk to me about... Sorry, Celeste. I interrupted you there. Finish that thought. Sorry for interrupting you, and then I'll ask you the question about AI. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. It's fine.
Yeah, you were mentioning, and I'm fascinated by it, that after this is implemented, after we come out of this current crisis, that you mentioned there'll be more of a technological field. Technology will be more prevalent in the very near future, leaning towards artificial intelligence. Do you want to expand on that a little bit and give us that in kind of plain English? What will that mean for businesses?
Okay, so if the listeners want to go to www.weforum.org/platforms, and then I'm just going to scroll down just like the listeners would do.
Yeah.
So right now, manufacturing and production have been disrupted. On the other side, artificial intelligence and the UN Sustainable Millennial Goals will be the law of the land. There won't be any talking about it. There won't be any resistance. They are going ahead and implementing this, whether the people like it or not, under the guise of COVID. So that's number one. There's 18 different ones, so I'll do them really quick here if my fingers will let me do it. All cities, infrastructure, and urban services will be disrupted. They are talking about taking down the power grid for a particular amount of time. They did not specify how long that would be, to make us, not only would we not have food, we would not have power, and they're going to make us beg for this new system. So the future of consumption, most of us do consume different goods. Most people don't produce things anymore, and they are going to hit the future of consumption very hard. And like I said, it's going to be an artificial intelligence that tells you what you consume. And I'll give you one little teaser on this. So for food, most of us have the foods that we really, really enjoy. Well, coming out on the other side of COVID, you are going to be allowed 1.2 ounces of either a laboratory protein or an insect protein. There will not be any protein available to you from an animal, because that is being banned. We can take nothing from nature, and each one of us, it is going to be our civil responsibility to the world to cut our footprint down in half. And then we will be allowed, I think it's 36 grams of carbohydrates And that does not include any sweetener, just plain carbohydrates, 36 grams in 21 days. So we are going to be on a starvation diet. So also, it's going to impact the world of cybersecurity. There's this big war for digital trust right now. You're seeing it play out in the media and who's going to win. And, the hand is kind of favoring the House, which is AI, because AI is the one that allows or doesn't allow certain information to get out to us these days. There's going to be a new digital economy, and they are creating new value chains. So the value chains that we have known and trusted all of our days are no longer going to be accessible to us. They are starting, and as we're locked in our homes, they are doing a whole new value system. There is the future of energy and materials. That's going to all change. The future of financial and the monetary systems, the future of global public goods. So there's many things involved in that. All of health and healthcare is going to change under this AI UN system. The future of investing is going to change. Of course, we're beginning to see a lot of messaging in media, entertainment, and culture, and that will continue because the government, the public-private partnership is going to use the media to condition us, to tell us what is right, what we're doing right, and what we're doing wrong.
Can I just briefly interrupt there? We've got loads of time. Well, as much time as you've got because you're a busy woman. I want you to carry on that train of thought, but you said so much there. I want to just dig down into it.
Okay, sounds good.
Most of what you, when I say most of, I think pretty much everything you said there, I now believe to be true. I believe it to be happening. A lot of people listen to this program. They're startled when they hear this stuff and they don't believe it and they don't want to believe it. And I'm keeping them in mind. I just want to ask you just a couple of very quick questions. You mentioned there, and I believe that there is an agenda for this. You mentioned there about how our relationship with food is going to change and how, we're going to be eating lab-grown protein and farming is going to change. I believe you're absolutely right, Celeste, but I also know that it is difficult to find hard evidence. Like if I go to the World Economic Forum website or if I go to the UN website and other websites, I can't get that in black and white. And yet I believe you're right. But my listeners, some of them will say, well, she's not, Richie, because she might be very intelligent. But where's the hard evidence that we're going to be, in the very near future, asked to make such radical changes to the way we eat and the way we consume? Now, bear in mind, Celeste, that I'm not trying to be chummy or pally with you. I believe you're right. But finding the hard evidence, where is the hard evidence to convince my audience this is coming?
Okay, so let's go up to, I think it's the public good. If you go to the weforum.org platform and then you press the shaping the future of the global public good, I think that's where the food is.
Global public goods, that's right. Well done, you've got it there. Shaping the future of global public goods. I'm there, right. I'm there. Go ahead.
So then you get a short little 3-paragraph summary, and then underneath it talks about all the projects that are associated with the public good. And that's everything from water to climate to forests. And down on the second line is innovation with purpose, strengthening food systems through technology. And you go on down, there is, oops, my computer does this weird thing. Circular economies. It goes into many different things, sustainable, then more things incentivizing the food systems transformation. And you can just go on down. Now, if the if you go to the very bottom where there's it's kind of black and it will say featured sustainable development. And this is at the very bottom of this future of global public goods. It will show you all of the articles for the last couple days that have to do with this particular topic. So here's one. This app lets you order leftovers to help you fight food waste. That was March 11th. UK's CO2 emissions have fallen 29% over the past decade, March 9th. And then over on the right-hand side, you can see different news stories that deal with this particular topic. So you don't have to take my word for it. And then let's say you really want to drill down on the food. So if you go up, well, if you actually go back to the platform,
I'm following you. I'm following you. This is very good. This is weforum.org/platforms. If you happen to be able to navigate the internet while you're listening to this, because I just want to commend Celeste. I was looking at this today. What she's saying is absolutely right. In all of these projects that are listed in this segment under the global public goods segment, the future of global public goods, all of these proposals, there are articles and articles and articles and references to papers that propose the very things that Celeste has been saying to us in the last 10 minutes. It's mind-boggling.
So it's not only proposals, they're actually implementing it. Everybody from the United Nations to our various countries have said that they are operationalizing this, which means that they are bringing this to life. I don't want to lose the listeners, because if they really want to get to the heart of the matter, so scroll back up at the World Economic Forum platforms, and if you go over to the right hand side, you'll see something that says top link. And your listeners want to press that button, and you kind of do have to sign up to get this part, because it's like what's behind the curtain type stuff. But if you put your email address and you do a password, then it's very easy to get in. And what that access allows you is access to their strategic intelligence and their plan. And it has a short little video that's 3 minutes that introduces you to how technology is going to run the world and run your life. But the reason I think it would be advantageous for your listeners to go and sign up for this strategic intelligence is this plan. Now you need to know my background was FEMA and my background was plans. And so I know government plans very well. And this is 200 layers deep, this plan. So there's no way that we can, some people are hoping it will go away. Some people are hoping that things will return back to normal. But they have invested an enormous amount of money and time. And these plans, they are operationalizing them right now, which means they are bringing them to life.
Transforming human existence in a very short space of time, and using threats, either real threats. Now, I don't believe the real threats. I don't believe that man-made CO2 is warming the planet. I personally don't believe that, but I do respect other people's opinions. So using threats, real or imagined, mostly imagined, to scare the public, to put the fear, not of God into them, but maybe put the fear of the devil into them, to the point where they will go along with the transfer of decision making to artificial intelligence programs, and lead us into a world, Celeste, that we maybe had a glimpse of in some of the great science fiction films of recent years, the dystopian films. That's where we're going with this, basically.
Yes, that's where we're going. I mean, when you go to this strategic intelligence page, you see that they've left no stone unturned. There is no place you can hide. There's no place to get away from it. We are going to have to face this world. And a lot of that is going to depend upon your worldview, your spiritual maturity, finding the deep resources that most men and women have had. That's how we've all survived. Yeah. This is actually an extinction level event that we have begun. I believe that the reason that they chose this time is we are going into a grand solar minimum. It has a lot of ramifications. The planet is starting to turn back to a snowball Earth. I believe there actually have been 5 extinction level events in history, and that those are recorded in trees, in ice cores, the geology. And what the UN was trying to do is piggyback and gain control of humanity before we get too deep into this extinction level event.
So that's why you think it's been expedited then? Because I think her name is Valentina Zharkova. She's a UK mathematician on the programme, and she was very, very good. I've had Piers Corbyn, Jeremy Corbyn's brother, on this programme, and they've talked about the Maunder minimum, and they convinced me that you're right, that we are going to have this cooling period. It's going to be very cold. So knowing that's coming, they've got to lock us down all the quicker. If you'd said this to me 10 years ago, I would have believed you, but I would have said, at the same time, I would have said, do you know what, Celeste? They'll never police this. But now, 10 years later, as the world has gone as close to cashless as it's ever been before, as we live on the internet, as we are terrified these days of losing our jobs, Celeste, if somebody shares one of our tweets and says, look at that Celeste Solomon there, she doesn't like transsexuals, you could lose your job now. So 10 years ago I would have said, they'll never police it. Now, social crediting, cashless society, I believe that they have the means to police it now. They can do it easily.
Absolutely. And a lot of people go, well, if they take the power grid down, which in these papers on this site that we're looking at, they do say that they are going to take the grid down. It will come back for a brief time, but then in a few years, we're expecting a very major solar flare that would take the grid down permanently. So a lot of people go, well, how will they police us all if they don't have any electricity? Well, I've been in those discussions, and they do have redundant systems, primitive systems, and very advanced systems. So the government would have power, but the average person is not going to have power. There are also all these drones. I don't know about the UK, but in December, 7 million drones were deployed across the United States. 7 million. That's 7 million. Quite a lot of drones. And then there's the nanoparticles. And what the nanoparticles do is they can harvest and get their energy from the environment, or let's say they lodge in your lungs or your brain or your body, these nanoparticles that we can't see, but they get into our body. They actually harvest our energy to power, and then they report back to their master what is going on in our body. And we're all going to be faced with this. I'm sure you're hearing in the UK some good news that we can get back to normal if we do a few things. And they're just starting to trickle out what those few things are. And one of those is that there's going to be these tests. And right now they want everyone's DNA in their database. There's reasons for that we can go into. There are many different levels of vaccinations, and I'm going to be researching that this afternoon and doing a special report on that tomorrow. And then there is the censor, which is very alarming because I don't know, did you hear my report on the censor?
I did, yeah, I did. I'm going to tweet a link out to it while you're talking there, Celeste. I'm multitasking here. Let's get into that. Go ahead.
Okay, so basically this was DARPA. It's a black military program in the United States that does various scientific programs, and they wanted to put chips in people's brains, but they didn't want to have to do surgery or anything like that, or even inject it. So what they did is they developed this nanoparticle hydrogel, and then it was equivalent. They would put it on the brain, and then it would. I'll tell you what it does in just a sec. But now with this COVID, what they have decided to do is to put this hydrogel in a hypodermic needle and then inject it into your body. Once this gel is in your body, it assembles itself. It is self-assembling, and it starts to grow, and it fuses to your tissue. So a lot of people were concerned about the RFID chip.
Yeah.
Well, our RFID can be taken out, but this hydrogel actually fuses to all your tissues, and it grows. And the most alarming thing about it is that you become one with you become a computer interface. You become one with the net, and you are controllable at that point. And that's what's very dangerous. They can track you through it. And how it will be sold to the public is we need to know that if you're sick before you know that you're sick, before you get the sniffles, before you run a temperature. This will report to the public health officials the state of your health. And they are going to require this for every man, woman, and child.
And you have to imagine that because of how scared people have been, how scared they have become over this COVID-19 fiasco, as I believe it is. And I see it, in my neighbours. I genuinely do. I see it in my neighbours, and I see it in my local park when I go walking my two dogs, my old and very young dog. I see people are petrified. So I imagine then if their government, and the majority of people, sadly to say, haven't heard the Celestial Report, excellently produced as it is, and they've never heard of Richie Allen in Salford in Manchester. They think their government is benign, is warm and cuddly and well-meaning. So if they do say to them, what a dreadful, dreadful experience that coronavirus was. Listen, we've got something here. It's really good. All it means for you is a little trip to your local general practitioner, little prick, and it's all over. And then in the future, you won't have to worry about being so ill or the flu bringing you down. And I reckon, Celeste, if you put it to people like that, they might line up to get it. What do you think?
Well, not only that, they're dangling it as a carrot that if everybody does this, then we can get back to normal.
Yeah,
we can get back to the way that it was. They're lying because it's never going back the way that it was. But that's what they're going to promise the people, that things will be the same as it was like at Christmas time before this all hit. And we'll live our lives, but that's not true.
Isn't this really interesting? Governments, this is just my opinion now, and you can disagree with this. Obviously, presidents and prime ministers, they're just front men and women. They're just actors playing the part, pretending to people that there is a viable democracy, but they're just front men who take orders. And it's very interesting to watch the UK media at the moment because it is castigating the UK government. This is amazing. The media, which is supposed to hold the government to account, is castigating the government. It's supposed to be checking whether or not we really need to be locked down. the media should be asking the government, tell us more about this virus. Why are you asking to change our lives? No, the government is being lambasted by the media today, and it's relentless, Celeste, because not enough people are being tested to see whether they either do have or have had the coronavirus. They want every citizen in the country to have that very uncomfortable procedure with the Q-tip up the back of your bloody nose. And you think that is related to the creation of this crazy invasive technology that they will put in our bodies so that they, can know what's going on inside our bodies. So this desire to get all of our DNA on Q-tips is related to what you just told me a second ago.
So basically, when they have the DNA, I knew that that's what they were after when they developed the test. And so I went into what America has, the Federal Register, and I did find that what they would be doing, they did a regulation on it, that they would be running your DNA through law enforcement. Well, in the past week, since all these tests, now millions of people are getting the test, articles are starting to surface. Well, since we have the DNA, we might as well run and see if you have any non-communicable diseases. We're going to check your family background. They run it through law enforcement, both for post-crime, like if you've ever gotten a speeding ticket in your life, and pre-crime. And everybody, that's why they want every single person to get this test. So, and they're going to scare us to the degree to ensure that all of us get this test so that we all voluntarily submit our blood to them. And, I have a biblical worldview, and I believe that our blood is holy unto the Lord. And if we voluntarily give it to the government, they're not promising to keep it confidential. And if they do, they're lying. They have all these, they swap it like our blood, like trading cards now between pharmaceutical companies and anybody else that wants our data and information. I'm sure you're aware of all that. Yeah. So even the test, the coronavirus test, is very suspect and an invasion of our privacy.
It is. I want to remind our listeners who we've what we've been talking about. It's 8.5 minutes or thereabouts past 6 o'clock here in Greater Manchester. It's just after 1 o'clock Eastern time in the US. I know that Celeste is on Mountain Time. Let me remind you, we've got Celeste Solomon on the line. She is a former FEMA worker, employee. She's an author and a broadcaster. You can find her website is shepherdsheart.life. I will put links out to her YouTube channel where she regularly presents riveting and fact-based discussions about these issues. And I can't recommend them highly enough. And we've been talking about Celeste's discovery in recent weeks of what went on in Davos in January when the World Economic Forum convened. And on the World Economic Forum website, if you can spend the time going through the articles, the platform section and the top link section, if you can sign up, there is a blueprint there for a dystopian world, a dystopian future run by artificial intelligence. It is claimed that this is necessary to protect us from the ravages of climate change, to protect us from global pandemics. It's astonishing stuff because it's there on their own websites. You can't ignore it. Now you can find Celeste, as I said, at shepherdsheart.life. Celeste Solomon is with us. Here's the question then. Who and why? Compartmentalization is something I hear a lot on this program over the years. Richie, why do we not have so many whistleblowers? And I say, my guess is, I always say we have some. We don't have as many as we'd like because of compartmentalization. But the question people ask all the time is, I heard your program the other day. Really interesting lady on there, Celeste. And she got me thinking. But who and why? Who would do that to civilization, to humanity, and why? It's not an easy question to answer. I've great respect, by the way, for your spirituality and your belief in God. My best friends are believers in God, and they're Christians. I'm a bit agnostic. I used to think I was an atheist. These days, I don't know what I am, Celeste. I'm certainly very open-minded. Who and why? Who is behind it? And what are they doing it for? What's the reason?
So there's basically always been evil. There have been very good people in the world. And unfortunately, history has shown that there's very evil people in the world. Are they from outer space? Are they alien? There's some discussion on that. All I can say for sure is that they are very evil individuals. They're a handful. They do have the massive amounts of money behind them. I think it's like, I don't gamble, but if I were a gambler, when you go to the casino or whatever, there's the house. And, the house is always favored. So this evil is kind of favored in a way, at least in this world. And why I wondered that same question of why they would do this. What is the end goal? I think that evil wants to usurp God's. God created the world and everything in it. And quite frankly, when we look, it's a beautiful world. I mean, there's nothing more beautiful than looking at a sunset and hearing birds tweet and looking at a forest. It's so, it just puts us at peace. It gives us joy. Delicious food that we, is homegrown or that we maybe go out and get in the wild somewhere. I mean, it's wonderful. But there's this evil that wants to be like God, wants to be the Most High. And I heard this one person, I don't know, his name is Anthony Patch. He covers a lot about CERN. And he did one broadcast, and it stuck with me. And what he said is that basically this evil is so evil that they want to destroy the whole planet. And that's part of the goal with CERN, is to send these strangelets that go straight to the core of our Earth and eventually turn it into a neutron star. By that time, these evil people, whether you consider them human or not, believe that they are going to be uploaded into machines or they'll live off planet. And so they want to create a new world that they make with God totally out of the picture.
You know what's incredible? Sorry to interrupt there, but I just want to remind our listeners about CERN. We first heard about it some years ago in Switzerland. The Hadron particle collider, accelerating particles together at speeds unimaginable to try and create the conditions whereby the universe came into being. That was the official version of it. But listening to you talk about evil there, somebody said to me some years ago, Richie, watch the opening ceremonies around the unveiling of CERN and the particle accelerator, and you will see it's practically demonic and occult leaning, to say the least. I dismissed it, Celeste, until I watched it, and it is full of occult symbolism and demonic symbolism, to the point that I just laughed out loud.
Yes, I watched it too, and it was horrifying.
Yeah. And I was trying to cut it because I generally don't interrupt people. And you were in a train of thought there, but you're mentioning CERN, and I know because it's not been in the news for a long time, a lot of our listeners were probably thinking, CERN, what's that? I remember that, but what? So that's what it is. And you think that rather than a genuine scientific experiment, it might be something designed again to transform our planet in some negative way, while giving those behind it the opportunity to maybe move on to something else.
Yeah, move on to the next level. But they don't want to merely transform and control the population. They want to turn us into a neutron star and then restart on another planet or something else. That's why there's a lot of news about exoplanets and the like. They want this planet completely destroyed because it's a power struggle between God, who created this planet, and this evil force that wants to destroy it.
And the vast, you're obviously very intelligent, Celeste, and you know I don't say that to be, to be kind or to score points. You're obviously very intelligent. You're an excellent broadcaster, even though it isn't your background. You worked in FEMA. You're very, very good at researching materials, and you're very good at putting it together in a way that I can bring you on and say, well, look, what Celeste is saying, she has backed up by showing me the documents and the references. That's outstanding. It's all there. But yet I know, I'm going to sound very negative here now, and I don't want to upset our listeners, because this is a rotten time for people. I don't think we'll ever convince people that something like this is going on. And I'm not defeatist, I'm not negative. You might say I need to be a bit more spiritual. I might need to open myself up to God, whomever God is, a bit more. Maybe you might be right. But I can't see how we'll ever convince enough people of what they're trying to do to us before it's too late, before we've got the microchips or the technology or the nanotechnology, the things that I know that get referenced as the mark of the beast, and I understand why. I just don't think we'll ever achieve it, Celeste. Tell me I'm wrong. Is there some light at the end of this tunnel?
There is light. That's why each one of us has a normalcy bias. And what is a normalcy bias? It's basically our comfort zone. And we all want it to just be normal. Like, I wanted to just be a normal grandma knitting baby blankets, on a rocker on my back porch and, doing all the grandmother type things, But the Lord called me to a different calling. And so as we face this brave new world that we are facing, if we do look at it, if we don't stick our heads in the sand, we can make some wise decisions. And maybe we will not be able to change the world any longer because it is going so evil. But we can preserve our humanity. We can still give kindness. We can share a smile. We can, I would say, hold a hand, but that's social distancing. But at least I don't have to social distance with my golden retriever. So I think that the battle has come down to each one of us, and each one of us has this opportunity that we can either stick our heads in the sand and say, no, it's not happening, or we can look at it, we can make wise decisions, we can say, okay, I will accept this. I know that I need to, do my part, or I can't do this. It will help us to refine our lines in the sand where, things, our world view and our belief system that we cannot compromise on. And we have this opportunity right now, each one of us, and we can respect one another's different. Like, I can respect your line in the sand is different than mine.
Yeah.
And that's fine. But that's part of retaining our humanity. And as we go against this transhumanist monster, the best thing each one of us can do is keep our humanity. And that means all the things of being a human. Maybe you're gifted in one way or another way. Maybe your love language is making nice food and you can take a nice meal to a friend. Or maybe it's being a compassionate listener. So many people are hurting and fearful these days that they would just welcome somebody that will listen to their story, that their life has value. So there's many things that we can do to maintain our humanity as we face this transhuman Goliath, so to speak. And I think we can do it. I think each one of your listeners has that potential to maintain their humanity.
I used to think, just based on what you said, I used to think that on a local level, with no money involved, people always think about money. Oh, I don't have any money. I used to say to people, you don't need any money. If you do something really nice for somebody locally, if you start to make little changes locally, I used to think that your act of decency locally put out a positive energy that had a positive impact on people in the area, even if they weren't consciously aware of it. I used to believe that. And then I thought that I was becoming a bit new agey, and I thought, well, no, that's a bit silly. But I'm beginning to wonder. I think you're right. I think if you take the time to do something nice for somebody, or to take an interest in people again, to get away from the mobile phone, the smartphone, cell phone, your laptop, and have physical interactions with people. Of course, by physical I don't mean, touching people, but standing in the same room as somebody, chatting to somebody, sitting on their sofa, having a cup of coffee or a cup of tea with them, rather than this kind of disconnected paradigm we live in now. I think that will create a bit of positive energy, and maybe the way for people to start doing something. Because people often say, and I guess you must get it too, Celeste, through your brilliant program. People must say, I don't know what to do. But if you do something in your own community, you can't change the world, you can't change things in Beijing or in New York, but in your own community you can make a change. I think you're onto something.
Yeah, absolutely. I got this one story to share. So I was in the grocery store. This was in the 80s. And so that was a while ago. And there was this little old lady, and she was eyeing this loaf of bread that was, she was probably like 5 feet tall on the top level, the top shelf, And of course she couldn't get it. And I go, and she was really looking really hard at the, you could tell she was trying to decide which bread, but she couldn't even reach the bread. And I said, could I bring one of these loaves down, or both loaves, to help you make a decision? She goes, oh, thank you. That would be so nice. And so she made her decision. It was a rye bread. And she just looked at me and she goes, thank you so much. She goes, my name is Esther. And I said, oh, that's nice. And so I looked for her every time I went to the grocery store after that. I never did see Esther again. She was probably, I would say, 85 or 90 years old. But I'll never forget the small little exchange that we had. Yeah. It just brought a smile to my heart. And I know it brought a smile to her heart.
It's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. As a dog walker, you'll know. Dogs are so important. Some of my listeners now, they'll roll their eyes back and they'll groan, but they don't understand. One of the wonderful things about having a dog or dogs, and when I say have them, you don't really have them, you don't really own them. I think dogs are just like cats. You don't really own them. They kind of own you. But we, as dog lovers, our dogs make us, I think, amongst the most social people in society. Don't they, Celeste? Our dogs draw us to people, whether we like it or not. Like I was out this morning just after 6 a.m. and I don't want to talk to people at 6 a.m. Not because I'm a bad guy, but I'm still half asleep and I'm waking up. But I end up speaking to 2 or 3 different ladies, a gentleman whom I've gotten to know quite well, a lovely young couple that I've gotten to know, all of them taking their dogs out really early. And we exchange information and we get to know one another. And there are people then that you can rely upon if you ever need a little bit of help. And it's a wonderful thing. There's a lot to be said for having pets in your life and how they kind of broaden your social horizons. And of course, you'll know that being a dog lover yourself.
Well, for me, it's a little bit different. I live, my husband was killed 3 years ago, and I don't have family and I don't have a social network other than my virtual network. And so I live alone in the wilderness in the Rocky Mountains. And so Zippy, my golden retriever, I mean, she greets me in the morning and we do take our walks, and she's my fellow traveler and companion when I go venturing out. And right now she's locked in the bedroom because last night she was a naughty dog. I was on air and she was barking, but I just no sooner started being on air last night and we had an earthquake. So I think she was all stirred up because of the earthquake and the aftershocks.
Right.
So,
Isn't that amazing? She felt it. And she's been, I have no idea what it's like to lose somebody you love, and I don't know you very well, so I won't, I'll forego the false sympathy. I won't do any of that. I can't imagine. But I imagine it's a wonderful thing to have her companionship, especially living kind of in isolation as you are. I imagine she's a godsend.
She is a godsend. I just, I love her to pieces, and she knows it. And she takes advantage of it too, you know?
Yeah, they're clever. Yeah, they're very clever. I'll ask you this before we're going to run out of time in a few minutes, partly because you have a lot to do. You have your own broadcast, you have your own life to lead, you have your own show to prepare. And I meant what I said at the top of the programme. I was really impressed watching you, Celeste, because it's not your background. I can be a bit snobbish, about presenting in media because I have a background in it. But I'm increasingly impressed more and more when I come across channels like yourself, that you've people like you, I'm coming across more and more of you particularly, who've got a natural kind of a penchant, we say penchant or penchant, you've got a natural kind of tendency towards, I think you do very well. The channel is excellent. I mean, you get tens of thousands of views per video, which is a great thing. So I want to congratulate you on that. And I am going to put links on my Twitter page for people who haven't maybe heard of you before. I think it's going to be more of a gift for me, to be honest, because you've got such a huge following back home. I think it's going to do me the world of good having connected with you. But I want to thank you sincerely for coming on, and I hope that we'll stay connected, and in the near future, as you're uncovering more and more information, I hope you'll come back onto this programme and share it with us, because I really enjoyed having you on today.
Yes, maybe when I do my research on these countermeasures and the different types of vaccines, maybe we could do another interview and I could discuss what each one of those means.
That would be brilliant, because we didn't really get into vaccines today, but one of the UK's most, I suppose, prominent health figures is the Labour Party's health spokesman, who's John Ashworth. He's from this part of the world, actually. He was saying today, we need to get people accustomed to maybe more lockdowns until we can get a vaccine. And then he said the immortal words, and everybody will have to have the vaccine. So before you go, just in the last couple of minutes, and thanks for the offer. I will, of course, leave the door open for you anytime to come on and talk about vaccines. But just in general, the vaccine element of this, we've got to pay attention to it, right?
So what people don't realize is the vaccines contain aborted babies. They contain humanized mice. These are mice that have human organs, human blood, human immune systems. They're basically a human in a mouse suit. And they also contain humanized plants. And these are plants that have human proteins coursing through their vascular system. And they're going to take this hybrid concoction of, it's basically an abomination. It's not the way it was created in the beginning. And they're going to mix it all up. And supposedly that's going to keep us safe from the coronavirus.
And that's, I don't like to be melodramatic, and I don't think I am. there's a cannibalism element to that, right?
Yes.
It's sickening, isn't it?
And that actually has been in play for quite some time. You probably are unaware that they have been inserting human genes into things like tomatoes, rice. There are aborted babies used as flavorings in processed foods. Of course, it says natural flavoring, but and that's natural, but there is that bit of cannibalism about it.
It's a fact, Celeste. It's a fact. And again, there will be some people listening to this, maybe through Fab Radio in Manchester, and they will not want to hear it. And they will say, crazy conspiracy theorist, but it is a fact. We know because we've seen the documentation. We've seen it from the horse's mouth, so to speak. And I'd love to, not that I'd love to, because it's a horrible thing to be talking about, but people need to understand it. I'd love to have you back on in the very near future as you get more and more info to talk about it here. Folks, you've been listening to Celeste Solomon. She's an excellent broadcaster. She presents the Celestial Report. She's an author, and we could talk about her books in the future as well, and a former FEMA employee. Her website is shepherdsheart.life, but I promise, and I know many of my listeners are already aware of who Celeste is, I will put links out to the direct link to where you can watch her YouTube presentations. Godspeed to you, Celeste. Thanks very much for giving us your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, and all the best to you and your golden retriever.
Thanks so much for that. I really appreciate it. You were listening there, as I said, to Celeste Solomon, live on the line from the Rocky Mountains in the wilderness, where she lives with her 1.5 old golden retriever. Terrifically researched woman. I can't say that enough. I spent the last 24 hours watching the videos, cross-referencing the information. And I want to again thank my mate Joanne from Chorlton. I won't give out Joanne's full name, but Joanne emails me regularly and put me on to Celeste and to her programs. I wasn't aware of what she was doing, and it was actually Joanne who did the production. She went and got Celeste and got her to agree to coming on this program. So the program produced today with the assistance of my mate Joanne in Chorlton. So I want to thank her for that. I'm going to take a tune now. No, I'm not. I'll take a tune in a moment. Before I do that, I'm going to do this.
Thanks to you, The Richie Allen Show is the most listened to independent radio show in Europe. Show your support for this unique broadcaster by making a regular financial contribution. Just the price of a cup of coffee each month will make a massive difference. Visit richieallen.co.uk for details.
All right, I will take a tune then, and when I come back, I want to talk a little bit about journalism. Citizen journalism. I'm going to be a bit of a pain in the arse. I'm going to give you a mini lecture about, discerning for yourselves what is credible and what isn't. And you can tell me to go and feck off if you want. I don't mind, because I've got very thick skin. I'm going to play a song. I haven't heard this for years, and I heard it this morning as I was researching this program. I had my own music on in the background, and I had a music platform on playing random songs, and I heard this gorgeous song that I've not heard for ages, and I decided that I'd play it for you today. You are with the Richie Allen Radio Show, 26 minutes to the top of the hour, and this is Donna Lewis, so it is.
Feels like everywhere I will be with you, everything I will do.
Yes, I Love You Always Forever from Donna Lewis on the Richie Allen Radio Show, live from Salford in Greater Manchester, 22 minutes to the top of the hour. Wednesday's programme. Tony Gosling is in New Zealand. Is he trapped in New Zealand? I don't know. Tony's a terrific journalist and the presenter of the politics show on BCFM in Bristol, and a very old friend and dear friend of mine. Because he's in New Zealand, which at the moment he thinks 12 hours ahead of us here in the UK. I'm going to phone him up in the morning and record him and bring you that on Thursday's Richie Allen Radio Show. A number of you have said, why no live streams in the morning, Richie? I will return to occasional live streaming in the near future, in the very near future. I won't do it every morning, Monday to Thursday, Monday to Friday, but I might do it a couple of mornings a week at least. Okay? My health has to be taken into consideration, number one. Number two, no live streams at the moment because everything is COVID virus. I was minded the other morning of that great Saturday Night Live sketch about Star Wars. I can only imagine what life was like when Star Wars was in cinemas for the first time. It was everywhere. And there was a marvellous Saturday Night Live sketch, I think it was Saturday Night Live anyway, where they parodied the Star Wars theme with the lyrics, Star Wars, nothing but Star Wars, nothing but Star Wars every day. Well, we've got that with this fucking COVID thing. Nothing but COVID virus every day. So there isn't any point in me telling you about the news headlines in the mornings because it's COVID-19, it's coronavirus. Yes. So Monday to Thursday, live radio show as usual, and Sunday View, Sunday mornings at 11 o'clock. Hi to Stuart, who tweets as, "These are the damned." My memory these days is like that of a goldfish. Did I just say hi to Laurie Hatfield? Did I say hi to Laurie? I can't remember what I did 4 seconds ago. Who was on the show with me today? I can't remember. Laurie loves that song I just played. Steve James, how are you, Steve? It is frightening, that which Celeste was saying. Far too frightening, says Steve, for people to believe, whether it is fact or fiction. I think it is frightening. I also think, Steve, while you are right, I also think conditioning plays a big part here. People have been conditioned since the 70s to believe that anything outside of, the herd, anything outside of that which you hear regularly is a little bit mad, dear. People have been conditioned. Once you go down that road of agendas, people have been conditioned to think, yeah, well, that's crazy, that tinfoil hat stuff. But that was an agenda. We know this. We've talked about this many, many, many times. Patricia says, let's enjoy the empty streets while we can. That's Patricia Actis. I don't like the empty streets, Patricia. I'm a bit nervous. And I said this to John Rappaport, didn't I? And this came up during the phone-in last night too. People's acquiescence to the measures imposed upon them has made me a bit nervous. People have made me nervous. The blank stare, the uneasiness, the fear in people is making me a bit scared. And you might say, well, sure, we saw this coming, BBG. We did. But it doesn't make me, any less uncomfortable at the speed with which people have gone along with the measures imposed upon them. I'm very nervous. And I think the point made by Celeste in our conversation a moment or so ago, some of the points she made there about people and people's reaction to it, and how people will accept, well, we've got this new tech, don't you know? It's only a small thing. You need only come in. It's a very small injection. You won't even feel it. It's a little bit of tech, and we'll know before you know in the future if there's something going wrong with you health-wise. If a virus is attacking your system, we'll know. Celeste said, I think people would be quite happy to go along with that. I think she's right. And it's not good. Hi to Irene Patashner. How you doing, Irene? Nice to hear from you. Irene says it's nice to have you back, Richie. It's nice to be back. Hi to Dean Smith. How you doing, Dean? Once the connection to AI is made to humans and the matrix is upon them, they still won't wake up, says Dean, because they will not have a point of reference. These bastards will have built memory loss into the program, tweets Dean. That's an excellent point, Dean. David Stanford says, I doubt if pets will be allowed in dystopia. That's another very interesting point. I can't overstate the social interaction, the socially interactive aspect of having a dog. Honestly. Honestly. You don't see people speaking to one another anymore in public parks, except dog walkers. Because the dogs, the little bastards, they have the habit of running to other dogs. And I don't believe in having dogs on the lead. Dogs are not prisoners. We leave our dogs off, even the 5-month-old retriever. She runs free in the park, and she's very good. She comes back to me when I call her. I only had to use the cattle prod, 50 or 60 times. Right. I didn't use any cattle prod just in case you've not got a sense of humour. So the dogs lead us to other people, and we talk to other people, and then we talk about things. You know, the price of eggs, the coronavirus. And I find amongst quite a few of Salford's dog walkers, there is scepticism about the necessity to be locked down as we have been. And I think that's a nice thing. Gives me a little bit of optimism. You know, I meet dog walkers and they're like, Richie, this is mad. There's no need for this. Now, none of these people are aware that I make a radio program of this type. And I don't know what many of them do for a living. But it's lovely to hear that. Richie, I'm not sure about this. It's a bit smelly to me, and I think good. So it's a great social, thing about having the canine chum. Hi to Philip Mills, who says he thought he was red-pilled, but Celeste has blown his mind. He's heard things he hadn't heard before. Hi to the left hand of God on Twitter, God's left hand, who says the Luciferians are in charge of the loony bin. Try explaining to the plebs that it doesn't matter if we believe in Lucifer or not. The feckers in charge do. Now, that's a very interesting area of research, because something that my old friend David Icke, my learned old friend David Icke, has talked about for many years and has explored is the notion that those really in charge. Now, Boris Johnson couldn't organise a piss-up in a brewery. He couldn't organise a fucking cricket match. He is not running the country. Nor was Theresa May, or David Cameron, Gordon Brown, Tony Blair, John Major, or Margaret Thatcher, or Jim Callaghan. I could be here all day. They're front men. I made a video. I didn't make a video. I didn't. I did a monologue some time ago about the film Casino, and somebody who listens to this radio program was kind enough to make it into a video on YouTube. And I used the film Casino as an analogy to explain the global power structure. And I was quite pleased with my work, if I don't mind saying so. And I explained it there. You can find it on YouTube. Richie Allen Show, Casino, Global Power Structure. Johnson isn't in charge of anything. Anyway, back to David Icke. And Jim Mars and others who went before them. They believe, and they have provided compelling evidence to believe, that those really in charge, people whose names we never hear, are Satanists. And as my friend on Twitter, Left Hand of God, says, they do believe in a dark energy. They do believe in a dark figure, whether it's Lucifer or Beelzebub or whatever. We know this. We know that Satanism... Look, we've seen those famous pictures, haven't we, of the Rothschild bowls and the Baphomet goat's head. I mean, who the fuck, right? Right? At a bowl, right? Right. And don't infer by me mentioning the Rothschilds that it's just the Rothschilds. It's not the Rothschilds exclusively. The royal families, they're all into it. They believe in it, this dark energy. And I've believed for many years that these are areas that George Lucas was kind of getting into when he was thinking about Star Wars, you know. But anyway, we're 11 minutes to the top of the hour. I want to just say something about 50 or 60 people sent me a video and were desperately keen for me to watch the video, and they were desperately keen for me to share the video and to endorse it. And I said, I can't. It's a video that's been doing the rounds for a day or so, and it's been watched by a large volume of people. Last time I was linked to it, 600,000 people had watched it. The video seemingly is of a man who claims to have worked for Vodafone talking about the dangers of 5G and what 5G is meant to do. But it can't be verified. The video. The man's legitimacy as a former employee of Vodafone or as somebody that is an expert in 5G technology, that cannot be verified. So the video isn't very much use to me. Some of the things being said by the guy in the video may have some authenticity, for sure. But who the guy is up in the air. Whether it's a genuine guy is arguable, so I can't share it. And that upsets people. And I point out to people that I have a background in journalism. And I can't go to, not so much to print, but I can't go to air and say, hey, listen, this guy here, Vodafone, because there's no proof the guy ever worked for Vodafone. And that riles certain people who listen to this program. And I'm mindful of the fact that many of us are, we're in the light, so to speak. We're not in the light, but we have some inkling of what's going on, and we have some understanding of the agendas described earlier by Celeste, pretty eloquently, I would say. So we do. And for some of us, it's horrifying. And they're so desperate to share this with people that something will come across their desk and they will move it on, they will share it on, and they won't give it a second look. And what it does is it discredits you, and it discredits the efforts to make people aware of the dangers of 5G in general. Because the sheeple, or the perplexed as you might call them, are not as stupid as you think they are. And when they see stuff like this, they do have a look. And it does occur to them that, well, there's no proof that this guy worked for Vodafone or that he's an expert in non-ionizing radiation. So I'm saying to you again, be a little bit more savvy when it comes to sharing information around and claiming it to be legitimate. Be a bit more savvy. Be as circumspect. Be as vigilant with the independent media as you would be with your local television or your national radio stations. Even if you are convinced that geoengineering is an agenda, and as you know, I am convinced that it is happening. If you are convinced that 5G is going to devastate or have devastating consequences for human health, as I am convinced of it because of the people I've spoken to, the academics who have come on this program, I can name several, but I'll just name Chris Busby. You know this is going on. You know the depopulation thing is happening. But still, when stuff comes across your desk, be a bit more discerning. You know, don't just share it on without even looking. Because you're not as awake as you think you are if you're sharing stuff on without looking properly at it. Having a real look at it and saying, well, yeah, some of the stuff that guy is saying computes, but I can't claim on my social media pages, I can't say Vodafone guy exposes this because I don't know who he is. And that's all I'm saying to you. Don't be getting annoyed at me when I won't share it on. Don't be silly. Don't be obtuse. Don't be childish. Can't share it on because I don't know who the guy is. Could be anybody. I prefer to refer people to the conversations I've had with people like Chris Busby and others. And Barry Trower, for example. I say, look, I can tell you who this guy is. I can tell you these are his credentials. Now have a listen to him. And still at the end of it, if you want to tell me it's a load of bollocks, well, that's your own business. But at least I can say I know who this guy is. So some of you need to, some of you are not as awake as you think you are. And you need to cop onto yourselves. Right? I'm a big Egypt, you know, myself. I have a million faults. Millions of them. But look, I'm a journalist, and I won't say something is true unless I can verify it twice. Unless I've got two verifiable sources. I will not say to you, I believe this to be true. I've had lots of people on the programme before saying things that they haven't been able to verify. We talk of, there's a lot of conjecture on this programme, a lot of supposition, a lot of speculation. Of course there is. And you know that it's supposition and conjecture, because I'm not telling you it's true. I'm saying have a listen to this. But when it comes to 5G and all that, you know, I want to remind you that you know, you've been pretty hard on me in the past for not promoting certain people in this country, for not giving them a platform. And I've said I can't. And you said why? And I've said, well, because one such person told a pack of lies last year that 5G was used at Glastonbury and it made a lot of people unwell. Now, this did not happen. And I said, I can't put people like that on the air. This is the reason why I avoid fat used car salesmen like this guy. I can't do that. But some of you are so desperate to convince people that all of this is going on, that you will use unsound, dodgy to say the least, and some cases ridiculous source material in your efforts. And it's not good, is what I'm saying to you. Don't come crying to me then when I won't share the videos. Find the guy. Let's find the guy. Let's find this former Vodafone boss. There is no evidence this guy worked for Vodafone. Nobody's been able to verify this. A former guest on this programme, a friend of mine, Francis Leader, who I've had on, excellent researcher and commentator. Francis has turned the internet upside down trying to find out who this guy is and can't do it. Therefore, I can't endorse it. Right? Right. Okay. There you are. Be as hard and as sceptical with your independent media sources as you are with the BBC and Channel 4. That's the way out of... I was going to go all Dante there. But I won't. So there you are, okay? So don't be having a go at me. Right, it's 3 minutes to the top of the hour. That's it for the programme. Thanks so much to Celeste for coming on. I really enjoyed her. That's Celeste Solomon, who was on the programme earlier on. Tony Gosling will be among the guests on Thursday's programme. That'll be pre-recorded tomorrow. The programme will be live. I'll be here with you live tomorrow at 5. Until then, have a brilliant rest of your Wednesday. Look after yourselves and one another. And speaking of songs I haven't heard for ages, here's The Darkness and Justin Hawkins and a song called I Believe in a Thing Called Love. Bye for now. Thanks for listening again. See you later.